Hey guys, I'm Serena, and today we're going to be talking about the Nine of Swords. So, I want you to imagine for a second that it is the Middle Ages, and you are a woman, and you do not have any civil liberties or rights whatsoever, and you are an old woman, and your husband just died, and you are completely, lost as to what's going to happen next. And everything about the situation, the fact that there's no man in your life to represent you in court, it's just completely stressing you out. Everything that you feared happening, for your entire life, is happening now. So let's get into it. So that's the story of the Nine of Swords. So the general theme of the Nine of Swords is about the ability, it's really about mental suffering. At its root, the Nine of Swords is about this mental suffering that we all kind of come to. So in a positive light, we can spin it and say the general theme of the Nine of Swords is about being able to cultivate the power of the mind to calm negative thoughts and neutralize anxieties so that you can sleep more peacefully at night, right? So while we talk about this card, I just think it's important to point out that thoughts, fears, anxieties, depressions, though their root might be in something that's physically tangible and unchangeable, the power that we give to those thoughts is just only permitted by our choice to give it permission to have power over us. So the Nine of Swords is an indication of mental illness or of physical illness. At the time of pulling this card, my baby actually was diagnosed with pneumonia. So it could be an indication of physical illness or mental illness. And we're going to talk about if we're talking about mental illness, because it's something that maybe we can do something about. So it's even possibly the physical illness has started to uncover some level of depression or anxiety alongside it. So at the very least, the Nine of Swords indicates that there is a level of fear currently present. So this fear could be resulting from actual nightmares, and these nightmares might be causing you to lose sleep. Maybe even your fears or anxiety are keeping you up at night. See, they're tormenting her. So, however, the objective of the Nine of Swords is to take these thoughts and flip them on their heads. So, refocusing from a new perspective of recovery will act as a sort of revelation in this situation. So, by actively rejecting your fears, you will manifest the most positive possible outcome. By writing down your anxieties, you can identify each positive opposite, so which in turn will give you a roadmap to follow to get yourself out of this Nine of Swords energy. For example, let's pretend that we just went through a really horrible breakup with someone that we've been with for a long time, who we love very much still. So what might be plaguing our mind at this time could be let's say we wrote these thoughts down, right? This pain will never end. I will never love someone as much as I loved them. I'm never going to move on. I feel so alone. I am unlovable. So by writing down the positive opposites of these negative thoughts, we can actually use those as sort of affirmations to guide us through this period of mourning that we've found ourselves in. So the positive opposite of this pain will never end. With each moment, my pain is lessened, and one day I will feel nothing in regards to this situation. So I will never love someone as much as I loved them. I love each new person I meet more than the one before. I will never move on. One day soon, I will meet the person that I'm meant to spend my life with. I feel so alone. I have so many people in my life who care about me. I'm unlovable. I am learning to love myself more than anyone else ever could. So let's decode the Nine of Swords. So the 9 in tarot represents completion or perfection, and the swords represents the power of the mind or the intellect. So where all of the other suits, pentacles, wands, cups, have found sanctuary in their completion, the 9s actually has transformed with the power of the mind to analyze a situation for so long that it has come to the realization of its worst fears, which is that in the end, nothing matters. All of your mind's worst fears seem to be coming true at this time, and the stress accompanying it feels unbearable. Because the 9 represents completion, it is possible that this feeling is happening as a result of the ending of a relationship or of a situation. And there might even be some level of guilt that's present within you, and you might not even be able to pinpoint where this guilt is coming from, which is causing your mind to be even more restless because you don't understand what's wrong with you. So I can see the moon from my window. All of this internal suffering from bouts of anxiety is making you wish that someone would just come and save you, like the lady in the bed, right? Like she wants her husband to come back and save her from this horrible situation that she's found herself in. So you might even feel like you're not strong enough to face this situation on your own. You are in need of emotional support at this time. And I just want you to know that that's what your friends are there for. If you have friends that are making you feel guilty for talking to them about your problems, those aren't your fucking friends. Like, you need to, like, understand that, like, if you're gonna be there for somebody whenever they talk to you about the shit that they're going through, like, they have to be there for you when you're talking about the shit that you're going through. So it's like a reciprocal energy, and it's okay. That's what friends are for. So if you feel too guilty to talk about it with your friends, like, just release that guilt and, like, just have a conversation with your friends about it. But on the opposite hand, if you have been talking about the same thing for a really long time, like, the likelihood of them being able to help you is pretty slim. Right? Because you've already talked about it with them a lot, and they haven't seemed to really give you any sort of insight that's helped you in any sort of way. So it might be a good idea to try something else. And I want you to know that if you're waiting for a sign to seek professional help, like, this is it. Like, this is it. Like, I will die by this hill that seeking professional help has been one of the best choices that I've made in my adult life, because it has made me, like, look at different parts of my life that have caused me fucking problems in a way that at least I know what's going on now. Whereas before I was kind of, like, blind to these things that, like, really sucked about my life. So at least I'm able to identify them so that I can work on them. And she's there to help me do that. Like, that's what her job is like, I pay her so that she can help me. So this is your sign to seek professional help. However, I would like to talk about the reversal of the 9 of Swords because it adds a lot to the story. So reversed, the 9 of Swords could be an indication that your fears and anxieties or depression or your mental illness has reached, like, a pinnacle, and, like, you're, like, losing touch with reality, and you need to seek professional help because all of the negativity that's circulating in your mind is creating this, like, manifestation of all of your worst nightmares. Like, you felt like you were going to be alone forever, so you manifested that, and now you've been alone for all this time, and, like, you don't know how to get yourself out of this hole that you've dug for yourself. So it's an indication that you feel isolated and unlovable when it's in reverse. On the flip side, the alternative interpretation of the negative, or of the 9 of Swords in reverse, is that we're finally starting to see a light at the end of the tunnel. We're coming out of this deep, dark depression that we found ourselves in, and yeah, so like my advice to you, like just in regards to this card, like is like when you're going through hell, like just keep going. Like don't give up while you're in hell. Like just keep going, dude, because that's how you're gonna find the way out. So it's almost like the story of the Nine of Swords is we are depressed. We identify our depression, it reaches a pinnacle, we ask for help, and eventually we start to see the light at the end of the tunnel. That's my interpretation of it anyway, but we're all on our own individual journeys, and we all have that in common, like that we reach this Nine of Swords energy. And as children, if we're lucky, we are protected from the cruelty of the world by our parents. And so collectively, we all experience this sort of like culture shock when that protection isn't there and when we reach adulthood, right? So this culture shock that I'm talking about in this situation is synonymous sort of like with the Nine of Swords energy. Like poverty exists, like children die of starvation, like maybe your parents didn't teach you about that, you know what I mean? Like the governments like are constantly at war with each other and like hurt innocent civilians. Like all of these things like could create depression within inside of yourself. So this energy like of the Nine of Swords is present within each of us, and it's felt individually in our own mind. Like swords, it's all felt in our mind, and so therefore it is determined individually when we felt like we've had it, like whenever we've reached a pinnacle, when we've reached a 10, when we say like I can't go on living like this anymore because I've ignored it for so long and nothing's changing. I've tried different things and nothing's changing, right? So at which point it is up to you to take responsibility for your own life, for your own feelings, for your own well-being, and reach out for help, or at the very least try something that you haven't tried before, such as listening to a self-help book, listening to self-help podcasts. Like we all experience this Nine of Swords energy. There has to be some sort of knowledge that you can come into alignment with that will help you to get out of this like Nine of Swords energy that you're feeling. And if you can do it once, you can do it again. So astrologically, the Nine of Swords is represented by Mars and Gemini. And if we decode that, we can understand Mars is a sign that represents our aggression, our motivation, our drive, and Gemini, being represented by the astrological totem of the twins, represents duality, opposites, and the acknowledgement of the shadow self. So this placement reminds me a lot of the story of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And because the Nine of Swords is included in the tarot, it tells us that not only are like people with Mars and Gemini experiencing this Nine of Swords energy, but each of us experience seasons where this energy is present. So in regards to Mars, the planet of aggression, in the sign of Gemini, it reminds me of the story of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, because we each experience moments, especially in regards to our mental health or our like depression, which in turn like creates like this lack of motivation, where our shadow self is increasingly present and eventually starts to take over us and deplete our sense of purpose and control. So there are periods of time each of us go through this sort of like mental torture brought on by the evolution of the suit of swords, or the brought on by the evolution of the mind. As we get older, sort of like we come to this like Nine of Swords realization just naturally. So there might be multiple times in our lives where we experience these Nine of Swords periods, but the key is to understand that the wheel of time is constantly turning. Like the cards are constantly being reshuffled and pulled, and this like moment of Nine of Swords energy isn't something that has to be permanent. It's like if we allow the wheel of time to pull us out of this like state of depression and put us back on top, like it will, because that's like the order of the wheel of time, right? Is it changes and things change. That's the only constant, is change. So therefore that means this suffering has to evolve into something else. And part of releasing suffering is releasing the ego and understanding that suffering is not unique to you. And no matter how important your suffering makes you seem, like if we go back to the example of like going through a breakup, like everyone I've ever met has experienced this same level of like pain and like this same level of egotistical thought that no one could ever possibly understand the pain that you've gone through, when we've all collectively experienced that same pain when losing our first love. So it's like very much like letting go of the ego, understanding that suffering is not unique to you. Like, okay, so interestingly enough, in the story of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Dr. Jekyll actually starts the story off as this like very well respected professor. He just occasionally has these like super wicked thoughts and he wants to suppress them, and in an attempt to do so, he like does this experiment where he compartmentalizes the like evil part of his mind so that he can like only embody the part of himself that is like a good person. And in turn, what this does is creates an alter ego called Mr. Hyde. And Mr. Hyde is the main antagonist of the story, and it is the same person as Dr. Jekyll. Like, he has separated himself into like good and evil, whereas before he was just like a normal person. He is now Mr. Hyde, and Mr. Hyde oftentimes takes over the body of Dr. Jekyll and lives out his most like evil, wicked fantasies. So all of this eventually leads to Dr. Jekyll poisoning himself and taking his own life in order to stop Mr. Hyde from like creating even more chaos. So I believe the moral of the story in relation to the Nine of Swords is that when we try to suppress the parts of ourselves that are ugly, not even allowing ourselves to even have intrusive thoughts without feeling guilt, the evil parts of ourselves actually gain even more power over us. So, like, if Dr. Jekyll would have just accepted himself for the imperfect person that he was, he would have never hurt himself or anyone else. And if we understand that we are not unique in our suffering, though this situation creating the Nine of Swords energy is unique to us, like, we can remember the universal truth of the Buddha, which is that life is suffering. And we are also not unique in our cynical thoughts, especially our cynical thoughts revolving around self-hatred, depression, or guilt. Like I've said before, like, confidence is just an illusion. This understanding will better enable our ability to accept our shadow self, who gives power to our mental illnesses and intrusive thoughts. This too shall pass. We all go through seasons of our life, multiple seasons at multiple times. For example, women have menstrual cycles during which we feel tired, we feel unmotivated, we feel uncomfortable, sensitive, we even like feel depressed. And I used to try to push myself through this season, and I would even take drugs such as caffeine to like push myself to go against my body's need for rest. And at the end of the week, I would end up like feeling even more depressed because I didn't ever live up to the expectation of being able to achieve everything on my like very impossible to-do list, especially when my body is trying to communicate with me that I need to take a moment and like chill the hell out. Like, so ever since I started like giving myself permission to rest during that week, and I do not expect myself to get anything done. Like, I totally allow myself to buy takeout and to lay in bed and to not take my kid out to do like a bunch of crazy fucking activities like going to the park. By the end of the week, I'm like so restless that I make up for all of that lost time, and my house is immediately spotless. Like, we're already on our way out to the park. Like, we have play dates lined up. Like, everything is okay because I actually spent time nurturing myself and honoring my body. So this message applies to the Nine of Swords because, as we know, we all suffer, right? Life is suffering. Once we start giving ourselves permission to rest and understand that one day we will not feel the need to rest anymore, we actually start to manifest the reality in which we get back up. So, with all that being said, I would say give yourself permission to be sad. Give yourself permission to be depressed, to be anxious, to be fearful, to be sad. Like, just remember that depression means deep rest. Your body is experiencing a cycle of depression in your mind because your body is trying to communicate to you that you need rest at this time. Honor your body, respect your body. Once we reach the bottom, like, there's nowhere to go but up. Once we've reached the pinnacle of the Nine of Swords reversed, like, this too shall pass. Once we understand how to get back up that very first time, we understand that we're capable of getting back up. Once we get back up that very first time, we acknowledge that there are impermanent seasons that exist within our life, and they're going to be ever present. So you might as well just like roll with the punches and give yourself permission to like experience seasonal depression, experience daily depression. Like, you will experience negative emotions every single day. Give yourself the permission to like feel them and express them however the fuck you want to. If that's laying on the ground like in a fetal position for like 10 minutes, like, give yourself that permission, and because eventually you're gonna get sick of laying there and you're gonna get back up. So, and once we get up that very first time, we start to understand ourselves better, and we have a better understanding of how we can help ourselves get back up in the future. So once I started viewing like my depression as this season of life and giving myself permission to be depressed today, right now, this week, this month, and I stopped making myself feel guilty about resting when my body was calling me to do that, when my mind was communicating that my body's need to rest by having me experience sadness or not giving me motivation to go and do all the crazy stuff that I want to do. The periods of time that season lasted became shorter and shorter. And at this point in my journey, having experienced this change in perspective for quite some time now, these seasons sometimes only last for like a few moments or a few hours or a day or a few days. So like, as soon as I'm able to understand that that's what's happening, I can understand, like, I release my need to control it, and I immediately start to manifest the reality in which it doesn't exist anymore, right? So allow yourself to be sad, to be afraid. Identify what specifically is causing this feeling inside of yourself, and give yourself the gift of creating the positive affirmations that we spoke of previously, so that you can refer to them in times of doubt or in times of need or when you're feeling like shit. So thank you so much for being here with me today. I hope you learned something, and I hope you come back again. Bye.